It is a beautiful morning here in the nation's capital. The Department of Justice will not prosecute former FBI Director James Comey for leaking memos detailing his interactions with President Trump. An Inspector General report released yesterday found that Comey violated DOJ and FBI policies, including the FBI's employment agreement, by keeping personal copies of his memos. One of those memos was released to the public by a friend of Comey's after Comey was fired by President Trump in May of 2017. The report says, quote, "The responsibility to protect sensitive law enforcement information falls in large part to the employees of the FBI who have access to it through their daily duties. Former Director Comey failed to live up to this responsibility." It goes on to add that Comey set a, quote, "dangerous example for current and former FBI employees." Ultimately, however, the watchdog report found, quote, "no evidence that the information released to the public was classified," which led Justice Department officials to the decision not to prosecute. Shortly after the DOJ watchdog reports was released, James Comey claimed vindication. The former FBI director wrote in a stinging rebuke aimed at the president, quote, "I don't need a public apology from those who defamed me, but a quick message with a 'sorry we lied about you' would be nice." Comey went on to add, quote, "and to all those who've spent 2 years talking about me going to jail or being a liar and a leaker, ask yourselves why you still trust people who gave you bad info for so long, including the president." But President Trump wasted no time attacking Comey, tweeting, quote, "Perhaps never in the history of our country has someone been more thoroughly disgraced and excoriated than James Comey in the just-released Inspector General's report. He should be ashamed of himself." The Trump administration didn't miss any words either, issuing an official statement calling Comey, quote, "a proven liar and leaker," words often used by the president himself. You almost want to laugh, Joe. You almost want to laugh.
I couldn't stop from laughing. What an overstatement, especially considering the source. Let's bring it right now. NBC News and MSNBC law analyst and editor-in-chief of Lawfare, Ben Wittes. He's out with a new piece diving into what the DOJ watchdog report really says. So, Benjamin, this is what a fascinating report. About 80–90% of it is Jack Webb, just the facts, ma'am. And then the last 10% of the report reads like a talk radio script. The two don't go together. I guess, though, a lot of people who supported Hillary Clinton might be chuckling this morning at the karma of it all. It sort of reminds you of when Comey himself said that Hillary was not going to be indicted and then went on his own talk radio rant for 10 minutes and indicted her politically. But this report, I mean, coming from an inspector general, I was fairly shocked at how undisciplined he was with what our law professors would call dicta.
Yeah, it's a deficient piece of work product in the last 10 pages. The first 52 pages of it are actually quite informative and a pretty dry recitation of a whole lot of details about facts that we already knew. And the reason we knew them was, of course, that Jim Comey has been kind of nothing but upfront about what he did. He wrote 7 memos detailing his interactions with President Trump. He, 2 of those memos he considered classified and left only in the FBI, but several of them he regarded as unclassified and had copies at his house and sort of thought of as his own personal property, and didn't return when he left or was removed from the FBI. One of those he turned around and asked a friend, not me, by the way, a friend named Dan Richman, to give to the substance of to the New York Times, and some others he gave to his lawyers. Those were the facts. Those were always the facts. And the first 50-some-odd pages of this report simply lays it out in great detail, in much greater detail than most people will want to read. And then the last 10 pages are a kind of howl of rage and anger by the Inspector General that is really takes a remarkable position, in my opinion anyway, that it is inappropriate for the former director of the FBI to blow the whistle on the president's efforts to shut down the Michael Flynn investigation. And to me, the remarkable thing about this report is that the Inspector General of the Justice Department has effectively taken the position that if you're a law enforcement officer and the president tries to shut down a valid investigation, your obligation is to shut up.
Yeah, that's actually what I was just going to ask you, if I was misreading the conclusion of this in an inaccurate way, because that's exactly what he says. It's a reckless conclusion and suggests that law enforcement officers, if they believe the President of the United States has committed a crime, then they should shut up and they should cover up. And it's just a reminder, Benjamin, there never really was a determination on whether this was a crime or not. In fact, the Mueller report suggests that they could draw no conclusion on whether the president obstructed justice or not, simply because he was president of the United States. So the question is, why would the IG come to this conclusion, first of all? And secondly, if this was such a violation of the public trust, why didn't the Attorney General do what he knows would gain the president's favor more than even writing him a $30,000 check this Christmas, and not bring charges against James Comey?
Yeah, so I think the conclusion on the point that you just mentioned is genuinely bewildering. The IG sort of chides Comey for kind of not going through channels in raising the concerns about, an Oval Office meeting in which the president asked him to shut down the Michael Flynn investigation. And I sort of scratch my head and say, exactly what channel is he supposed to have gone through? Is he supposed to have complained to the Attorney General? Well, the Attorney General was recused. Is he supposed to complain to the Deputy Attorney General? The Deputy Attorney General had just arranged with the president to help fire him. Is he supposed to complain to the president? The president is the subject of the concern. So what exactly are you supposed to do if you're the former FBI director who has this explosive information that is, by the way, not classified, and you have all the channels have failed? And that strikes me as the sort of quintessential example of a situation in which talking to the press, or in this case, having a friend convey some information to a responsible reporter, is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And the IG's position is, to sort of wag his finger and say, this violates your employment agreement and it violates FBI policy. And I guess to that I say, in such a situations, a foolish consistency with policy really would be the hobgoblin of small minds. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that that's the position the IG takes.
Ben, Susan Del Percio here. We talk about the IG report and how it affects Comey on a big scale. But it also is setting precedent for DOJ and FBI policies. I mean, this is something where what happens when the next rank and file member has an issue, whether it's with their direct superior or one up, and we see the politicization that we just did from this IG report, where do they go? I mean, how does this affect DOJ and FBI for the rank and file people?
Right. So, I don't fault the IG for noting technical violations of policy and the employment agreement here. I think, in the dispute between the IG and Comey about who owns these memos, I think the IG probably has the better of the argument. And you know, it's perfectly reasonable, in my opinion, for the IG to say, no, actually, these were documents you created in your capacity as FBI director. And to remind rank-and-file people that, in fact, when you're working for the government and you create even unclassified work product, that really does belong to the government, not to you to do what you want with. What's extraordinary about the IG report is the volume that he turns up the criticism to without any regard to the extraordinary circumstances. And he basically, it reads like he wanted to find that Comey had leaked classified information in a dangerous fashion. He couldn't find that because, you know, he didn't. But he gets angry that way anyway, as though it had happened. And so I think the message to current workforce members is, you know, be a stickler for the details of compliance with technical rules, even if the house is burning down, even if you're serving some awful larger objective in doing so, and ignore things like conscience.
Hey, Benjamin, it's Jonathan Lemire. James Comey has been a central figure in the drama of the Trump era now, dating back to that news conference he held with Hillary Clinton, for which he was also received a rebuke from a watchdog, to everything from the campaign and the release of the letter, reopening the investigation, and, of course, everything with the Mueller probe and his interactions with the president. Are there more threads, though, to be followed here? Are there more investigative matters that are going to be pursued? Or does this sort of, in some ways, close the book on the James Comey era as part of what we've seen the last couple of years in the context of Donald Trump's campaign and now presidency?
You know, I think this is probably the last major piece of investigative work product about Comey. But it isn't the last major piece of work product about the FBI in this period and under his leadership. And the same IG who produced this document is also working on a big report, which is apparently nearing completion, concerning the FBI's handling of the material in the Steele dossier and Chris Steele as a informant, as well as the FISA application that resulted from that. And so that investigation is still happening. My suspicion is it does not centrally involve the behavior of Jim Comey, just because the director of the FBI is sort of not a central player in how an individual informant is handled. That's a kind of lower down the totem pole kind of question. But it definitely involves the way the FBI under Comey conducted the early stages of the Russia investigation. In addition, I think most people, and I'm certainly one of them, am expecting an indictment in the next few days or weeks of Andrew McCabe, Comey's former deputy FBI director, and that will put front and center McCabe's behavior in the same period that all of this stuff is going on, in the form of a potential criminal trial. And so I think, you know, Comey's individual role may be, you know, on the wane as a subject of discussion, but I don't think we're through with the sort of FBI as a subject yet.
Okay. Lawfare's Ben Witters. Ben, thank you very much for reading that, analysing it for us. Still ahead, the must-read opinion pages, including Gene's new piece on something he says could get Trump kicked out of office. Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.